it's not like people are being intentionally racist on the whole. It's just about they're enabling a racist system that produces ethnic inequities. And so we just need to refocus people and support them with tools they need to do better.
Rauranga tira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai ki tēnei kōnei ipurangi, ko Ao Mai Te Rā. Welcome to this podcast series, Ao Mai Te Rā, where we discuss racism in all its forms and talk about how to get rid of it. With us today is Heather Kame. Nā mihi nui ki a koe.
Kia ora.
Tell us a bit about your background, Heather, and how you came to be a researcher with a particular focus on institutional racism.
Kia ora. I'm a seventh generation Pākehā New Zealander. I grew up north. I, as a 16-year-old, went to my first treaty workshop, and by the time I was 19, I was running one and have been involved in anti-racism work ever since then. So as an anti-racism activist, I took that into my public health practice and health promotion practice, and when I became an academic, that became the focus of my work. So it's what I've been doing essentially all of my adult life. Yeah.
And so how has that lived experience of activism and delivering treaty workshops helped to underpin the academic pursuit? Because I suppose sometimes people worry about, and I know we as researchers worry about the interface of research and putting things into practice.
Oh, yes. Well, as an activist scholar, it's fundamental to me that you do work that's useful. Like, I would find it bitterly disappointing if no one read the work we did and it wasn't useful. I remember when I was doing my master's and I was trying to read some obscure work by a feminist author, and I could barely understand it. And I thought, if I've got a master's degree and I can't understand this work, who are these people writing for? And so I try and write really plainly, and as an activist scholar, I'm in dialogue all the time with activists, and so the work is informed by where they want me to go, and the process is informed by things I've learned through being an activist about how you collaborate and how you work together and keep focused on the advocacy goals of what we want to see changed. So it's always thinking about how can this help people change the world for a better way. So that's always the focus of the work.
Ka pai. And so how do we change racism? What have you learned about the effective mechanisms to change racist thinking, behaviour, attitudes?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
And there is no magic bullet yet. But we know bits from different places, but racism looks different in different countries and in different contexts. What we've been doing in the public health sector with the work that me and my mates have been doing has been mapping the racism. So we've been identifying sites of racism, which then can be sites for anti-racism activity. So we've mapped the racism in how public health services are contracted, we've mapped the racism in how policy's made, we've mapped the racism in human resource practices, and you can map it in different places. And when you start thinking about racism, you think, oh my God, it's everywhere. You kind of get stuck and paralysed, and that's kind of the end of the conversation. So this idea of mapping where it is helps you deal with it in terms of dealing with institutional racism, which is my specialty. That whole gnarly personal mediated racism, changing people's hearts and minds, yeah, I'm not a psychologist, but I think that people need a reason to change. And people need to have some connection to the kaupapa, so it's about the heart, and then they need to know what to do. Because at the moment, I think in the health sector, lots of people are keen to do the right thing, especially after the release of the Y2575 report, but they literally don't know what to do. And so it's not like people are being intentionally racist on the whole, it's just about they're enabling a racist system that produces ethnic inequities. And so we just need to refocus people and support them with tools they need to do better.
Ka pai. Let's talk about institutional racism, your specialty area, for a moment. So when I talk to my colleagues, to my friends, to my whānau, these kupu don't necessarily resonate, and it's hard for people to know, what are you talking about? Institutional, structural racism. So help us really expand our understanding of what we're talking about there.
When someone turns up at A&E and gets offered different treatment on the basis of their race and assumptions by health professionals about how much work people want to do to get their person well, that can be passed off as personally mediated racism when it's a pattern of behaviour that happens to many people and it affects large numbers of people. That's when it becomes institutional racism. So it might manifest as one getting offered different treatments, but that's enabled by policies and procedures that allow the clinicians to have that discretion to offer different treatments to people on the basis of race, which isn't particularly helpful. Yeah, so it's about, so it's like people know what it feels like to experience racism, and you can feel it in your heart and you know that it's going on. But you people often think of it as an individual thing, but it's when you see the pattern of behaviour that you begin to see it. It's like you have experienced something by itself and you go, was that bullying? Maybe that was bullying, but you've got to link the stuff together and then you see the system of power that you're in the behaviour and the pattern. That's when it becomes more visible.
Right, so I hear what you're saying, that when we experience that as individuals, we feel somewhat isolated in that experience. We wonder, is it just me? Did I strike the person on a bad day? And we internalise that and have our own kind of meaning making around that. But we can't necessarily see the bigger picture when time after time, every time a Māori person comes into the ED, they get the same offering of less than a non-Māori person.
Yeah, and I think that I was, when I started, I went to work in Māori health from working in a DHB, and with my background in anti-racism stuff, I remember going to the contract monitoring meeting with the Ministry of Health about our contract, and we had a multi-million-dollar contract, and we were in and out in half an hour talking about our contract and indeed chatting about the whānau of the person who I was meeting with. Later, when I was working in Māori health, I sat in on the monitoring meetings of the Māori health providers, and I remember one day we'd been there for 3 hours and the crew had been intensely questioned. And they had a $70,000 contract, and the funder was asking them questions about, they'd sent someone to a course and what grades had they got, and they were pointing out a spelling mistake on the 3rd page, and it's like, it's only when you can look across and compare that you see that sometimes, because they thought that was an ordinary monitoring visit, and because I knew what an ordinary monitoring visit looked like and could compare, you can see. So it's sometimes the compare and contrast is a great way of getting a sense of what's going on and where the problems lie. And that was the game changer for me that led to writing the PhD specifically about this kaupapa.
So in your PhD, you also talk about the normalising to the point of it's almost sort of imperceptible, the racism that is in Aotearoa. And I was fascinated by that because I experienced that too, and in different roles, and as you say, in different areas where you can compare and contrast. And I wondered if you could talk more about that normalising, where it's almost something in the air we breathe.
So we did a study looking at how Māori are represented in health policy, and we looked at 140 policy documents. And we did a keyword search for the word Māori. 60-something of those policy documents didn't mention the word Māori. Because how we do racism in this country against Māori is by monoculturalism. So we squeeze out everything that's brown, that's Māori, and the default position becomes white. And that study, and we couldn't analyse how they talked about Māori health in those 60 documents because they simply didn't even mention Māori health. And that's a classic way of doing racism. And I'm sure the authors of those 60 policy documents wouldn't consider that they'd just written monocultural health policy and that was a problem. So it's insidious. It's about getting used to looking around the university and only 3% of the academics are Māori. So expecting to have a white teacher, it's like the amazing research that some of our colleagues did about why my professor is not Māori. It's in the documents, it's in the structures, it's in the systems, it's in you can't take your whānau to your PhD exam, it's in you can only take 2 people to graduation when you get your PhD, it's you have to do your assignments by yourself, you can't do a group PhD. There's a whole lot of things that their default position is suited to Pākehā cultural preferences. That is how the world is. So any space you care to look, you uncover it, really.
And do you have some comments about the fact that over different governmental phases, we've had laws that include kupu Māori, that include whakaaro Māori, and then we've had other laws written at other times that are, as you say, monocultural, the same with policies, the same with reporting, and different government levers that have been used, sometimes which have been very clear, do not include Te Tiriti of Waitangi in this report. We would be interested to hear your comments about that.
Well, clearly there was the evidence from the Y2575 clearly showed that there was particular times when directives were issued to remove reference to Te Tiriti in policy documents and contracts, and that's what happened. And that was a breach of Te Tiriti. So clearly that has happened. But my work, I hate saying it out loud, but it doesn't matter who's in Parliament at the moment because we continue to get the racism. The racism is still there, whether we've got a national-led government, a Labour-led government, whether the Greens are in, whoever's in, the business is still going on. So I'm less interested in the politicians, I'm more interested in changing the public service because those people have more job security and are more likely to last longer than some of the politicians. So I get that sometimes there's the racial tide goes in and out. And yes, there's possibilities right now. So I'm deeply influenced by the writings of Dominic O'Sullivan, who's one of the very rare Māori political scientists, and his book, Beyond Biculturalism, is a must-read for anyone interested in this kaupapa.
Elder.
And he talks about how having a Māori name to your organisation and having a senior Māori director doesn't change a government department or a government agency. And you can perform the most beautiful pōwhiri and have the most beautiful te reo at the beginning and the end of your letters, and that doesn't stop the systemic racism that Crown agencies are enacting. Aroha mai.
No, I think this is a point that's well made, and these points need to be made. So given what you've researched and what you bring to this whole debate and this discussion, what are the steps? We can notice where it is, we can identify the sites, and then what?
You take action.
And what sort of
some
action
of the
should
stuff,
we take?
some of the stuff we could sort out this afternoon.
Okay.
We just need to write a memo saying, stop doing this, do more of this. Okay. Some of the things are that clear cut. Some of it's not that tricky. Some of it is trickier. But like with one of the sites of racism is clearly about HR processes and who we have in senior leadership roles within the health sector.
Yes.
There's not enough Māori leaders. That we did research around who earned over 100K in district health boards and in the core public sector, and there was next to no Māori leaders in those roles. And it's like, we need Māori in leadership roles. We need 50% of governance being Māori, because you can begin to do things like, we shouldn't be, most of the Māori staff in government agencies shouldn't be the cleaners. That has to change.
It does feel like a no-brainer, doesn't it? I was just reflecting on advocating for some women in my field to be in more senior roles, and getting pushback about their CVs and how the CV is used as a means of racist control and, frankly, misogynist racist control. So these are these sort of the pointy ends where systems push back the CV, the HR system, as you quite rightly point out. Where are some of the other sort of pointy bits that you've identified that we could really send that memo today and say, this is unacceptable?
Well, one of the things we could memo today, if we were memoing, is that we could memo that policy documents need to include who the authors are, what their methodology is, and also they need to cite Māori and Pacific academics.
Kia ora.
Because I looked at 10 years of public health policy and I found 12 Māori academics cited in 10 years of policy document, and that's not acceptable. We keep going to the Northern Hemisphere to work out what we think is best practice, and best practice in the Northern Hemisphere, there's not many Māori involved in those studies. I think we need to look locally. And there's heaps and heaps of Māori academics and their work isn't being cited, and that's treacherous. So that could be a memo this afternoon. We could change the way we contract for health services this afternoon so that Māori nurses that work in Māori health providers don't earn 25% less than their colleagues in a DHB, and that is because of how we contract for health services. That isn't about mean Māori CEOs, it's about not recognising the cultural and clinical competencies of Māori nurses. That problem's been going on for 15 years, and we could write a memo about that this afternoon and sort it.
So what's stopping the people who have the ability to write those memos to do that?
Well, maybe we need to get them a memo pad and, I don't know, maybe it's that simple, maybe they haven't got access to the memo books. I don't understand their reluctance to act, because these things need to be done.
Yeah.
We've been publishing about what needs to be done, and, we could wait till all the ducks lined up and everybody agrees it's a good idea, but why do we think it's a good idea to not cite Māori academics?
What are they afraid of? What do you think they're afraid? Are they afraid?
Well, I just don't. We were going to do a T-shirt for our group Stir, Stop Institutional Racism. We were going to do a T-shirt, Trust Māori Intelligence. Because I don't think they do. I think we've got to trust Māori intelligence. Māori have the solutions. Māori are the folk that are going to turn around Māori health inequities. But we need to address the Pākehā racism. That monoculturalism needs to be disrupted. We need Māori leaders in key positions, and we need to change the way we consult. We need to change who we recruit, and we need to we need to sort out what we're teaching people in universities so that they come equipped with the political and cultural competencies to be robust health professionals that can do anti-racism work.
Talking about universities...
Yes, we've got a lot to sort out.
Yeah, so just recently we've had this letter in the Listener where 7 academics from the University of Auckland, one of them Māori, have said that while Indigenous wisdom, mātauranga, is helpful to science, which they define, it is not science itself. An extraordinary comment, and very much an example of what we're talking about. What were your thoughts when you read that?
Well, I was surprised they were doing it in public, but I think that they've been doing it in private for a while.
Absolutely.
And I think folk are a little flustered by the emergence of Mātauranga Māori science, and they're terrified that they're losing their spot as the holders of the truth. And that is quite problematic. And I've had some conversations with some scientists of late about this kaupapa before the letter. And it's like they've this idea that there's a hierarchy, just like Darwin dreamed. And I think at some level, they believe that they're holding the truth, that their ideas are superior to other ideas. And they're denying the magic that is, it's not just magic, it's, the science of Indigenous knowledge. And it's like, really?
And the irony to me...
It's very difficult to understand what they're up to.
Isn't it? Because to me, it's unscientific to take the position that they're taking.
Mm-hmm.
It's extraordinary. So...
and they're teaching students...
Yeah, and they're not walking their own talk, was what I was thinking. And they are influencing, these are professors, these are people that hold huge mana in that world. And
yeah, I struggle to understand why people can't accept there's multiple ways of seeing the world. But I'm a qualitative researcher, and there's many stories and many ways of seeing the world, but I certainly... as an anti-racism practitioner, don't kind of do hierarchies of knowledge based on race, because that seems a little Darwin to me. And I think he's been discredited, was last time I understood.
Absolutely. It's interesting to try to interpret and analyse, isn't it, why there does seem to be quite a flood of pushback just at the moment in the context of another major resurgence of Te Reo, lots more women having moko kauai, lots more discussion, and yet here comes the establishment stating their case, defending their territory. Do you think that interpretation has some weight to it?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've got a whole groundswell of folk interested in Te Ao Māori, I think, and that's seen in the new public holiday coming up.
Right,
Matariki. How magical is the new public holiday? So that speaks to the change. But we've got some folk with some very marginal views that have been quite noisy and articulate from here, but I also think we've got a whole pool of people in the middle that are the people that just want to have some ideas about how to do it. And for me, I'm interested in the people in the middle. Someone else can worry about those crazy people, but I'll chip in and do my bit about the folk that are my peers. That are saying crazy things in public, because they are my peers and they are indeed my responsibility in some ways. But I'm interested primarily in the folk that want to know how. And I want to, I think let's get them into the memo writing. Let's get them into working out where the racism is in their organisation and what they can do in their sphere of influence to change that, and how they can engage with others in collective action so their sphere of influence is bigger, so we can make change. Because the cost of inaction, which has been what the theme really has been of the anti-racism response in the health sector, is people's lives, and that's not acceptable.
That's right. It is a life and death issue, and I think that's the part that some groups in our community are in denial about, or are minimising, but in actual fact, you look at the rigorous scientific data, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, whether you look at clinical information, we have this ongoing disparity, which is explained by racism. What are your aspirations as someone who's right in the thick of this about a racism-free Aotearoa? Is that possible in our lifetime?
Absolutely, but racism isn't going to spontaneously end. And that's what we've been relying on happening for a while now, and that strategy has not worked. And that's why I'm really pleased that after many years of advocacy, the government has agreed to write a national action plan to end racism. And potentially today, our briefing paper about what needs to be in that plan is about to be released, which is very exciting, because we've been thinking about what should be in it. But I think we need a plan, and that's fundamental, but we need people taking action within their spheres of influence and not thinking someone else is going to do this for them. It's like the Alice Walker book, We Are the People That We're Waiting For. Well, I'm sorry, we are the people, so we've got to do what needs to be done. So we need to challenge racism when we see it. We need to keep our eye out so that we can recognise the patterns of behaviour and the systems and structures that disadvantage Māori, and then speak up. And we need to centre the Māori text, because I think that anti-racism in this country needs to be te treaty-based anti-racism. So we need to uphold those commitments that were made to tangata whenua. And if you're working in the health sector, make sure you read Y2575 and those recommendations, because we literally get told what to do. It's that clear.
Do you have any comments about how the health sector, education, justice, care and protection, how this it's formative in this phase of its development, but this new era of a Māori Health Authority might infuse its influence in other ministries and other parts of our society, and the need for that collective approach to really chase racism out of town?
Well, that's why that's a central part of our briefing paper, as if you've read it, is that we want one of the things that needs to be prioritised is dealing with the crown racism, because it impacts on so many people in so many ways. So if we can stop making monocultural public policy, that's a game changer. If we can change investment strategies, that's a game changer. And if we can address the barriers to people accessing essential services, game changer. So I think we need to focus the anti-racism energy on the powerful in the meantime. The academics can sort out the ideological front line with the scientists. We've got that covered. It might take a while, but we can work on that. But if the health professionals can work on their disciplines and make sure all the nurses have got it sorted, and the public health practitioners and the medical doctors, just find your area, dig in, gain ground. We've got to do it systemically.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Heather. I'm inspired and invigorated, and I'm sure the people watching and listening are too. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, ki a koutou. If you want to know more about this kaupapa, Au Mai Te Rā, have a look at our website. Ka kite.